Hare Krishna. So today we will resume our discussions in chapter 5 from verse 13. Sarvakarmani manasa sanyasyasate sukham vashi navadvar pure dehi neva kurvannakarayan. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of nine gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. So, in the previous 6 verses, Krishna had spoken about the importance of working with detachment. Now he takes up another important aspect that is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, which is understanding doership. So in 4 verses from 13 to 16, he will try to explain this notion of doership. Now this is important to develop detachment, because a lot of the attachment either to the activity or the fruits come from the notion of doership. If a person thinks that I am responsible either for the activity or the fruits, then the attachment is naturally going to come. So what Krishna is going to explain over here is that there is no exclusive doership. And through that, from a philosophical perspective, the jiva can also give up attachment. So there are 2 kinds of detachment that have been spoken about in the Gita. One is karma sannyas. So karma sannyas is giving up the activities. And the other is karma phala sannyas, which is giving up the mood of enjoying the fruits of the activities. Now, Krishna has said at the beginning of the chapter they are the same, but then at the same time he says that compared to karma sannyas, giving up activities, karma phal sannyas is better, which means that being engaged in your activity but in a renounced mood. Now, one of the advantages that comes forth of this mood is what Krishna says, that such a person resides happily in the city of 9 gates. Right? It says Navdvare Pure Dehi. So the city of 9 gates is the material body. There are 7 gates in the head, the upper part, the 2 eyes, the 2 nostrils, the 2 ears, and the mouth. And the 2 gates are in the lower part of the body, which is the anus and the genital. But Krishna makes this distinction to give us this understanding that such a person now understands the distinction between the self and the body. So when he says such a person resides in the city of 9 gates, then clearly that person is saying, I am not the city. I am simply a resident in the city. I am not the body. But I am just a spirit soul that is temporarily residing in this body. So this is the result that Krishna promises of one who works in the mood of detachment. So from Sakam Karma, Krishna gets us to the platform of Nishkam Karma, which is working with detachment. Now he is saying that Nishkam Karma results in Atmagya. That the person now begins to understand the distinction between the self and the body. And then he says, what is the result of understanding this distinction? He says, such a person lives happily. He says, Sukham Vasi, that the person is living happily. So generally, living in the material body is considered to be a cause of distress, because the distress is actually a symptom of the material body, whether it's through diseases, whether it is through the duality of the material nature. That's the nature of the material body. But when a person understands this distinction, then Krishna says Sukham Vasi. Okay, let's going on to the next verse. Verse 14. Na kratratvam na karmani lokasya srajate prabhu na karma phal sanyogam svabhavastu pravartate. The embodied spirit's master of the city of his body does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. So the verse talks about the jiva that was noted in the previous verse. And here also Krishna talks about the position of the jiva, that he calls him Prabhu, which is the master of the city of his body. Right. So this is clearly a jiva who has understood his position as being separate from the body. Now, what happens when such a jiva still goes and performs karma? So even though it's in a mode of detachment, what happens? Who is the person who is actually causing these activities to be done? So Krishna talks about three ways in which one is implicated in an action. So a doer may delegate. So that is kratratvam, which means create activities for others. A doer may inspire others to work, karmani, which is induce people to act. Or a doer may act himself and enjoy the fruits. This is karma phal sanyogam. Right? So Krishna uses na, negation, 3 times to emphasize that jiva with Atma Gyan does not participate in any forms of the action, which means that he may be doing all these 3 forms of actions. Right? So he may be delegating work, he may be inspiring others, he may be working himself, but because of his understanding of his position as a soul, the person is not implicated in any of the 3 situations. So in the 3rd chapter, Krishna gives the example of Maharaj Janak, where he says that personalities like Maharaj Janak act simply to set an example to others. So this is clearly a case of either kratratvam, that he is delegating, or karmani, which he is inducing, and also karma phala, karma. So even though there is no desire to enjoy the fruits, but the person, Maharaj Janak himself is acting, right? So all 3 are going on over there. But still, Maharaj Janak is considered to be on the transcendental platform because of his understanding of the position of the self with respect to the body. In the Bhagavad Gita, we also see that Krishna himself is inspiring Arjuna to act. But again, because the mood is that of detachment, there is no fault that is attributed to Arjuna in this case. Now, from a more technical perspective, one may ask that if the jiva is not acting, then who is performing these actions? Right? And Krishna says that all this is being done by svabhavastu pravartate, that the modes of material nature are doing all this. So swabhav literally translates to one's intrinsic nature, which is a result of a particular combination of the modes of material nature, right? So we have the 3 modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, and everybody has a certain combination. One mode may be predominant than compared to other, but essentially that is the swabhav, right? So the jiva is not implicated because he understands his own position, which means that everything is being acted upon by the modes of material nature. So now we see that Krishna is in the process of establishing doership. So in this verse, he has basically taken two doers. He has taken the jiva and swabhav and said the jiva does not do, but the swabhav is acting. Now this is a jiva that is in a liberated platform. But Krishna will extrapolate it and say that in all cases the activities are done by the swabhav, the modes of material nature. Now one might say that if the modes are passive and the jiva is not acting, then one should attribute the doership to the Lord. So this is something that Krishna will address in the next verse. Okay, verse 15. Nadate kaschit papam na cheva sukritam vibhuhu ajnanena vritam jnanam tena muyanti jantavaha. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. So, as I mentioned in the previous verse, one may say that if the jiva is not performing any activities and the modes are passive, then one can attribute the doership to the Lord. And empirically we see that happen. That people will sometimes perform all kinds of activities and they say, what can I do? It's the Lord's wish. And generally they use it to cover impious activities or laziness. It's everything is happening by the Lord's wish. So Krishna, understanding that this is a confusion that might arise, forestalls it by clearly saying over here that the Supreme Lord does not assume anybody's sinful or pious activities. So, why do people still attribute the doership to the Lord? Ajnanena avritam jnanam tena muyanti jantava. So, jantava, the living entities, bewildered, muyanti, by what? Ajnanena avritam jnanam. If their knowledge, jnanam, is covered by ajnana. So, this is a symptom of ignorance, because of which they accuse the Lord of being the doer. Now, developing the theme of doership, we see that Krishna has so far presented three doers. He says the jiva does not act, the modes of material natures act. And this, he's also absolving the third doer, the Supreme Lord, the Paramatma of doership. So the implication that is appearing over here is all the activities are being done by the modes of material nature. Understanding this, the jiva develops humility. That I am not the doer, but the modes are the doer. Understanding that the Lord is not responsible for the action, the jiva develops a sense of ownership. That it's not somebody sitting far up in the heaven that is pulling the strings and everything is happening. No, this is happening by my desires. Okay, moving on to the next verse. Okay, verse 16. Jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham aditya vajnanam prakashayati tatparam. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nations is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So in the previous verse, we noticed that Krishna had said that tena muyanti jantava, that those who are ignorant, they tend to falsely attribute doership to the Lord. So Arjuna may ask that what is the cure? And the cure is straightforward and intuitive, that because ignorance is the cause of this illusion, then knowledge is the cure for it. Right? So that's why Krishna says that when one is enlightened by the knowledge, and the analogy that he uses is as the sun lights up everything. So when the sun appears, then three things happen. One is able to see the sun, one is able to see everything around him, and one is able to see the self. And similarly, that's the impact of spiritual knowledge. That one is able to get Atma Gyan, see the self. One is able to see the source of knowledge, which is Krishna. And one is able to see things around them, which is Krishna's Maya Shakti, external energy, internal energy, and marginal energy. So in the fourth chapter, and this is, if you look at the verses 36 to 38, the process of getting knowledge of Atma and Paramatma is detailed, given in details. That by the mercy of an authorized guru, by following the parampara, by associating with saintly people, one gets the knowledge. So what is the knowledge that Krishna is speaking about? In this context, the knowledge that he is speaking about is understanding who is the doer. So the doer is not Krishna, the doer is not Jiva, the doer is only the modes. So as one is forced to think more about the confluence of these three doers, one is also able to develop a balance in one's approach. By understanding that Krishna is not the doer, one takes on more responsibility. By understanding that the modes are the doer, one develops humility. But by understanding that by the jiva's desires everything is happening, one takes on more accountability. And that way, one understands that by controlling one's desires, one is able to make progress. Okay, moving on to the next verse. Okay, verse 17. Tad budayas tad atmanas tad nishtas tad parayana gachanti apunaravrtam jnana nirduta kalmashaha. When one's intelligence, mind, faith and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. So we see that in the previous verses, Krishna has, in a subtle way, brought forth the role of the super soul. Even though he's bringing it as a neutral party, but still he has introduced the notion of the super soul. Now in 10 verses, Krishna speaks about the glories of meditating on the super soul. So we see that Krishna talks about 4 kinds of meditation over here. So tad atmana, by the mind, and tad buddhya, by the intelligence. So previously, one was using one's mind and intelligence to understand the nature of the soul. Now, the same mind and intelligence are diverted to understand the nature of the super soul. But there is a difference. One can understand the nature of the soul on the platform of Gyan. So Atmana and Buddhya, mind and intelligence, platform of Gyan. So one can use mind and intelligence to understand the nature of the soul. But to understand the nature of the super soul, Krishna adds 2 more things, Tat Nishtaha and Tat Parayana, which means faith and surrender, means refuge, surrender. So when one is trying to connect with Krishna, then the importance of Nishtha and Parayana, importance of faith and surrender is very important. So what is faith and surrender a characteristic of? Bhakti. So what does it mean? That Gyan is must additionally practice bhakti if they have to move beyond the stage of Atmagya. If they have to obtain knowledge of the Super Soul or the Lord, then they have to now also develop faith and the sense of surrender. Right? So, at this stage, when one is displaying these qualities, tad atmana, tad buddhya, tad nishtha, tad parayana, one is now ready to meditate on the qualities of the Paramatma. So, by their intellect, they're convinced of the qualities of the Paramatma, like the sense of neutrality, justice. Then their mind, tad atmana, becomes absorbed in the qualities of the Paramatma. And nishtha means with faith, now they make the Paramatma their goal. For what purpose? Tat parayana. Eventually for surrendering to the Lord. Jnana nirduta kalmasha. That cleansed of all misconceptions of who is the doer, I, me, Paramatma. So cleansed of all the misconception by the knowledge of the good qualities of the Lord, and having destroyed their intrinsic distaste for the Lord, they finally apunar avratam. They finally attain liberation. Verse 18. Vidya vinaya sampane brahmane gavihastine shunichev swapakecha panditaha samadarshinaha. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahman, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater, outcast. So this verse is now describing the symptoms of one who is meditating on the Super Soul. So it gives the example of a Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater, and they essentially represent the combination of different modes. So a Brahmana is in the mode of goodness. A cow is also considered to be in the mode of goodness. An elephant in the mode of passion, and a dog eater in the mode of ignorance. So when the verse said they see with equal vision, essentially what it means is that they are now transcendental to the modes. They're able to see the Brahman beyond the gunas. So why is the person able to see them with equal vision? Because they're seeing both the soul as well as the Paramatma. And so that distinction needs to be made, that at the platform of Atmagyan, one sees the soul in themselves, that I am the soul and not the body, excuse me, and one also sees the soul in others. So when they see a dog, they will see that even in the dog there is a spirit soul. Or when they see a Chandal, a dog eater, they will see there is a spirit soul there. So because of that, they will have equal vision. But still, a person at the platform of Atmagyan will make some distinction, because they understand that the reason the soul is there in a dog is because of certain activities that the soul performed out of its free will. So there is still that attribution of responsibility. That yes, this person is a Brahman because in previous life he performed pious activities. So there is some greatness in this person. And this person is a Chandal because he performed sinful activities and now he is a Chandal. So even though they see the soul, they make some distinction. But at the stage of Paramatma Gyan, that distinction also goes away, because in addition to the soul, they see the super soul. So they say that in the body of the Brahman and the Chandal, the Paramatma that is worshipable to me is also residing. And just like I have a relationship with the Super Soul, so do they have. Just like Paramatma is affectionate to me, the Paramatma is affectionate to them. So now they are looking at everybody as part of the same family. Whether the soul is sitting in a dog or a dog eater or a Brahman, they see that in relationship with the Paramatma. That my worshipable Paramatma, the object of my affection, is equally affectionate to the soul sitting in a Chandal as he is affectionate to a soul sitting in the Brahman. And they also absorb the same quality. So which is why they become truly Sama Drishti. Okay, so moving on to the next verse. Verse 19. Ihev terajitah sargo yesham samsthitam manah nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmad brahmani te sthitah. Those whose mind are established in the sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawlessly Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. So this verse glorifies the position of one who is meditating on the Paramatma. So previous verse talked about the symptom of one who meditates on the Paramatma, which is Samadrishti. Now this verse is glorifying those who are displaying that symptom, who are Samdrishta. So because their minds are absorbed in the quality of impartiality that is displayed by the Lord, they acquire the qualities of Brahman. So why do we say that Brahman is equal to all? So the verse says that because the Brahman is nirdosham, because it is devoid of attachment and repulsion, because the people are convinced of this quality, samam, in the Brahman, because of their meditation, they are Brahmani sthita. They easily attain liberation. Now, previously the focus was on Paramatma, and it seems that Krishna has changed a little bit over here, that he says that it is Brahman. But what we see is, so it's a couple of things to understand here, that Brahman has many meanings, and it could refer to Paramatma also. So Brahman means one that is something that is spiritual, right? So it could refer to Paramatma also. Second also is that when one meditates on the Paramatma, then the intent is important. So in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, we see Lord Kapila instructing when he's talking about Astanga Yoga. But there he says that a yogi who meditates on the Paramatma, desiring Lord Krishna, the personal form, gets Lord Krishna. Right? So it's the intent also that is important. So if one meditates on the Paramatma, but focusing on the impartiality, the Brahman aspect of the Paramatma, then one attains the Brahman. So the flaws come from the duality, like love and hate, and because the Lord is flawless, since he is free of duality, then one who meditate on that quality of freedom of duality attain that aspect of the Lord, which is the Brahman aspect, and that's why they are known as Brahmavadis. So it means that even those who are impersonalists, the Brahmavadis, they also need faith to understand the quality of the Lord. Now, the Paramatmavadis, they see the impartiality of the super soul with respect to the souls, and they are undisturbed because they see everything happening by the will of the Lord. And the devotees or the bhaktas, they see Krishna everywhere, so they are undisturbed because they see Krishna's hand everywhere, Krishna's kindness everywhere. Right? So this sameness comes from different impetus. For the Brahmavadi, it comes because they have transcended the material duality. For the Paramatmavadi, it comes because they have understood the impartial nature of the super soul. And for the bhaktas or the devotees, it comes because they understand the kindness of Krishna. Another point to understand here is also that sameness does not mean that such people become unaware of the distinctions. So it's not that they see a cow and a chandal, or a brahman and a chandal, and they treat them exactly the same. They're not aware of the distinction. What it means is that they are not prejudiced by the distinctions. So they don't look at the brahmana and fall on the ground and give obeisances, and look at the chandal and treat the chandal with contempt. They don't get prejudiced by the distinctions. But nevertheless, they do see the distinctions. So that quality of sameness is coupled with equanimity. That sameness means that while seeing the distinctions, they maintain their equanimity. They do not get prejudiced. Okay, so moving on to the next verse. Verse 20. Na prashayet priyam prapya no dvijet prapya cha priyam sthira buddhira sammudo brahmavid brahmani sthitah. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the signs of God, is already situated in transcendence. So Krishna talks about the two aspects of one making advancement. So he talks about Brahmavid. The Brahmavid means that one who knows the Supreme Lord. Right? So this is the spiritual attachment part. And then he talks about Nodvijet, Praharshayet, that one who does not rejoice, Nodvijvet does not become agitated, Sthirabuddhira Sammudo, one who is properly situated, not bewildered. That person is qualified. Right? So essentially the advancement that one makes is on two rails. One develops material detachment and spiritual attachment. And Krishna talks about both of them over here. So one acquires these qualities of being sthirabuddhir and asammuda by the process of gyan. And one realizes, one becomes Brahmavid by developing attachment to the Brahman. So this is essentially the stage of Brahman realization. That because one is materially detached, because one acquires the qualities like that of the Brahman, develops attachment for the Brahman, one develops acquires liberation. So Krishna in the verse, he uses the present tense to indicate that a sadhaka or a practicing devotees should develop these qualities now. One should not wait for them to appear as a result of other activities. One should constantly practice material detachment and spiritual attachment. Right? So we see amongst practicing devotees, there are two vows that are taken at the time of initiation. One is that you will follow the four regulative principles. So that is essentially not being bewildered by material duality, right? That is asumuda. And the second vow is you will chant 16 rounds. That is developing spiritual attachment. So Prabhupada explains that these very same qualities lead one to become a siddha or perfected devotee. So he says that this knowledge elevates him to the station of knowing the complete science of the absolute truth, namely Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagwan. He thus knows his constitutional position perfectly well without falsely trying to become one with the Supreme in all respects. This is called Brahman realization or self-realization. Such steady consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. Right? So what it means is that Brahman realization, when it is properly guided, will lead to higher stages. Sometimes Krishna says, devotees say, that why did Krishna even offer Brahman as an option if it is bewildering people, the impersonal aspect? And here we get the understanding that because the Brahman realization is one in which one is materially detached and is developing spiritual attachment. Now when that spiritual attachment is nourished properly, then from Brahman one can go to the stage of Krishna consciousness. Okay, next verse. Verse 21. Bhaya sparsheshva saktatma vindatyatmani yat sukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. So this is an interesting verse because Krishna here talks about two kinds of attachment and the results of them. Right? So one, he talks about the Vindatya Atmanya. So the person is enjoying neutrality because he is attracted to the Atma. So the result of Atma Gyan is that one becomes independent of the miseries of the dualities. That comes stage of neutrality. And because of his attachment to the Paramatma, the person attains the happiness permanently, Akshayam. And because he is relishing the sweetness of the Paramatma, he does not have a desire to relish the lower things. That is why this is Akshayam. That is why it is permanent. Because if one were to simply stay at the stage of Atmagyan, then one may give up their taste for the inferior things. But that has the nature of the soul is to demand bliss. So while they have given up this artificial bliss of material things, it has not been replaced by anything else. But when the person develops attachment to the Paramatma, now the higher taste comes into place and the person permanently gives up the desires for enjoying the material pleasures. So Prabhupada says that the highest pleasure in terms of matter is sex pleasure. The whole world is moving under its spell, and a materialist cannot work at all without this motivation. But a person engaged in Krishna consciousness can work with great vigor without sex pleasure which he avoids. Thus, that is the test in spiritual realization. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. A Krishna conscious person is not attracted to any kind of sense pleasure due to his being a liberated soul. So Prabhupada brings this to the platform of how do you verify that you are making spiritual advancements in your devotional service. So he says that the strongest attachment is sex pleasure. And when a person begins to lose taste for it, That is the test that the person is making spiritual advancements. Okay, moving on to the next verse. Okay, so we'll stop the discussion over here. There are 7 more verses left, so we'll complete it in the next discussion. Thank you. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.